Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk with you guys and have a chat. I've learnt so much already. It's amazing. I love migratory birds. I love shorebirds. And also, I think we've got so much to learn about how to better manage this country through Indigenous approach. So thanks so much, Wade, for that last presentation. So I was going to start with just an acknowledgement of country and the country that I'm meeting on. I'm down on the Central Coast, so I'm on the lands of the Dark and Young. And the Dark and Young lands extend from the Hawkesbury River up to the Hunter River and out to the Wategans. And I would like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the amazing connection that Aboriginal people have to this land and what an amazing job they have done of looking after it and continue to do. So this is me. My name's Roberta Dixon-Valk. I'm a marine ecologist, and I've spent over 30 years looking after our oceans and the plants and the animals and all those who call the ocean their home. Back in 2009, a friend of mine, Amanda Marichal, and I got together and came up with an idea where everyone could participate and a simple action could help improve the amount of plastic that was ending up on our oceans. That was take 3. And so we joined up with Tim Silverwood, and take 3 for the sea was born fundamentally. But I thought I'd give you a bit of backstory about why I ended up as a marine ecologist and why I ended up so much in love with our oceans. I grew up on a beautiful estuary, Pittwater, which is to the north of Sydney. And back about 70, 80 years ago, my great-grandparents brought there, and no one wanted to live out in Pittwater because it was too far away from the city. So I had the luxury of growing up in this amazing area, which was right on the water, and catching the bus to school every day. I got to meet a whole lot of critters, and I believe that's why I ended up so much impassioned by the marine and coast and estuarine environment. So these are some of the critters I'd meet, and we could literally look down into the water and see all these little guys buzzing around. So toadfish and hermit crabs, octopus, crabs, mud crabs, pinnate prawns. And then, of course, for all those guys to exist, we need all the vegetation. So we had the Grey River mangroves and the seagrasses, Zostera, Capricornia, not so much Posidonia, just threw that in because it's a beautiful photo. So the reason why I ended up getting involved in conservation, which I've done for my entire working life, was because when I was about 5 or 7, I was watching the television and I was watching these guys being hunted and collected, well, basically killed for their pelts. And that felt so fundamentally wrong to me that I knew my interest was in conservation and I wanted to protect species like that. So that backstory sort of takes us to why I got involved in marine and why I'm involved in conservation. So after that, I actually I went to university and then started work with fisheries and other people on marine parks and education and habitat protection, with a big focus on seagrass because I love seagrass. And as that was all going on, I became aware that there was this problem in our oceans that really wasn't being dealt with and was exacerbating. And so I'd go down to these areas that I love, the ocean and the beaches, and I'd be finding plastic and lots of it. And so I started picking it up and talking with anyone who would listen about this issue of plastic pollution. And then, as I said previously in my other slide, I got together with Amanda and we came up with this really simple idea that the beauty of Take 3 is that everyone can participate. Everyone can be part of the solution. Take 3 is all about simple solutions to complex problems. And plastic pollution has really become a complex problem for us. And I'll go through a little bit of that detail with you. So the whole preface of Take 3 is that if you simply remove 3 pieces of plastic from the beach, the waterway, or wherever you are, you've made a difference. You can be an effective part of the solution. So what we want to do is engage with people. We really want people to think about what plastic, why we're talking about plastic pollution, because Take 3 for the sea is actually the start of a much bigger conversation. We're not only asking people to remove plastic, we're asking them to think about why we should be removing that plastic, and think about choices and why we're all part of, or why we've set up Take 3 in the first place. So Take 3, we talk about the values of the ocean, that it's, it's the majority of our planet's surface. 70% of the planet's surface is covered in ocean. It's 90% of our biosphere. It drives our weather, it regulates temperature, it produces 2 of every 3 breaths that we take, produces the oxygen, for 2 of every 3 breaths that we take. And it effectively supports all living organisms, and absorbing over 30% of the carbon that we produce through our fossil fuel burning. It's the most biodiverse system that we have on our planet. However, every minute, a garbage truck full of plastic and waste ends up in our ocean. And there's over 11 million tons of plastic making its way into our ocean through various leakage issues, and it ends up joining the plastic that's already in the ocean, and it doesn't go away. It doesn't just go away and break up and it's all gone. It actually breaks up into smaller and smaller pieces. But what is really fascinating to me is this, our historical usage of plastic, because the situation that we're in now is a result of the last 50, 60 years of plastic production. And we didn't always have plastic around. It's an amazing material that is incredibly versatile. It's strong, it's waterproof, it's resilient, but it's also those factors which make it so problematic. Back in the 1950s, we produced about 1.5 million tons of plastic, which sounds like a lot, but if we fast forward to into 2015, we were producing 407 million tons of plastic. And it's expected that by 2050, we'll be producing 1,600 million tons of plastic, all going well for the petroleum industry, which will outweigh all the humans on Earth by 5.5 times. Roundabout. So it's a lot of plastic. So at Take 3, we're also asking people to think about plastic use, and think about how we consume and why we consume and whether we should be consuming the amount of plastic we're producing. Because plastic is one of those amazing materials that's designed to last forever, but unfortunately we often only use it once. And the fate of plastic packaging globally is about 32% of plastic ends up directly in the environment through, as I say, leakage and carelessness and animals and all sorts of issues, but it ends up in the environment in some way. 40% ends up in landfill, which is effectively still the environment as far as I'm concerned. 14% is incinerated, which has all sorts of toxic residues, but the residues end up in the environment somewhere, and the gases produced through incineration are also ending up in the environment. 14% is recycled, but only of that 14%, 2% is effectively recycled. So that means like for like. 12% is downcycled. So it's actually, we're making a lesser product of that recycled material. So in the ocean, plastic breaks up into micro and nano bits of plastic. So it doesn't stay stable. The effect of sunlight and the action of waves breaks it into these smaller and smaller pieces. But when it's broken into these smaller pieces, it becomes more bioavailable for animals. And marine animals eat it. This is a baby Larsen albatross chick. The albatross, as people probably know, spend their lives foraging over vast areas of the surface of our oceans. And they're pre-programmed to look for things that are different colors and different reflectivity. And plastic, unfortunately, fulfills a lot of that. And also because plastic often floats, it's picked up and brought back to these chicks. And they never even have an opportunity to fledge. Their parents caringly giving the chicks huge amounts of what they're thinking is food, because no one's told them we've developed this amazing substance called plastic. And they're filling the chicks' bellies with things like bottle caps and lighters and all range of our consumer items. So we know, well, we've been using this figure for a while now. So this back in 2009, when we started Take 3, and even before, when I was doing presentations at our local Whale Dreamers festival, we were using this figure. I've been using this figure of 1 million seabirds being affected and 100 million marine mammals. But it's got to be a lot more than that, because I've shown you that the amount of plastic we've been producing has just been going up exponentially. So the deaths, and certainly the unrecorded deaths of a whole lot of marine animals, would be also going up. So this is why I guess we are getting so excited about the fact that we've got so much plastic in our oceans. But humans as well are not immune from consuming plastics, particularly the smaller plastics, the micro and the nanoplastics. With the micro are less than 5 millimeters, or 5 millimeters to about a centimeter, I think. But oh no, 5 millimeters to, pardon me, less than 5 millimeters. Nanoplastics are tiny particles, they're, size of dust grains. And we've been finding these plastic particles in our salt, water, seafood, and even the air that we breathe. So for the first time about a year ago, microplastics were detected in human placenta, which is worrying, but showing that we can be passing it also on to the next generation before they even are ever born. So the other thing we ask people to do with, this other idea of engaging people on the issue of plastics is the need to turn off the plastic tap. We've got to stop producing so much plastic, and we as consumers have a lot of control over that. We have to make better choices. So then we talk about empowering people to make a difference, to know about basically the issues and what's going on with plastics, so they can be talking with other people and making informed choices. So we've probably all been aware about earlier this month, we had the COP26 that our government dismally what's the word I'm looking for? Dismally presented Australia, basically. We were not in a very good space for that. But the COP26, before their actual event, the UN Secretary General suggested that this is a code red for humanity, that really this was an important COP meeting because the alarm bells were deafening and we needed to do something drastic about coal and fossil fuels. We needed to take them out of the system before we destroy our planet with them. And plastics equals carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. That's why I put the last slide in. So it's really important that we understand that plastics in the environment have a range of different impacts. And just by using plastics and producing plastics, we are creating greenhouse gases. Almost all plastic begins its life as a fossil fuel, and greenhouse gases are emitted at each stage of this plastic life cycle. From the extraction and the movement of that extracted oil and gas to the plastic production of different items, to then through all these stages, there's transport, which also involves fossil fuel production or fossil fuel consumption, the point of sale, to the consumer, to the waste industry, and then dumping or burning or leaking or however our plastics treated. Even recycling creates more greenhouse gases. So plastic is actually one of the most energy intensive materials that we produce. And even when plastics have been produced and are just in the environment, sitting in the environment, once they're exposed to sunlight, there's the production of greenhouse gases, methane and ethylene, which basically, just by being a chemical in a reactive situation, will just create these greenhouse gases. And so every single step of the life cycle of plastic, even long after it's been discarded, where plastic is creating greenhouse gas emissions and is contributing to the warming of our world. Okay, so if it were a country, the plastic kingdom would be the 5th highest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, which I think is where Australia now sits, unfortunately. It amounts or accounts for almost double the emissions of the aviation industry when it was operating most effectively before COVID. So plastics is the plastic crisis is a climate crisis hiding in plain sight. You can see it everywhere you go, and it's unfortunately unavoidable. And the prognosis is really not good, because if we grow as presently planned, these emissions could reach 1.34 gigatons, which is the equivalent of 295 new 500 megawatt coal-fired power stations. So that's just plastics alone. So if we can look at removing plastics from that equation, we're making a big difference in terms of our climate change emissions. So approximately 1 kilogram of plastic equals 6 kilograms of carbon dioxide. And we've taken that fact and used it in education materials we've been taking out to corporates and schools, and looking at people assessing their own carbon footprint of their plastic use. So if we take that equation of 1 kilogram of plastic equaling 6 kilograms of carbon dioxide, then the average plastic grocery bag weighs about 5.5 grams. And then if you do the maths, one plastic bag equals about 33 grams of carbon dioxide. And I was a little bit skeptical of that. I was going, wow, that sounds like a lot of carbon dioxide for one plastic bag. And 5.5 grams, that sounds pretty heavy for a plastic bag. So I set about weighing all sorts of things, all sorts of plastic items. And you know, the weight of plastic items and the CO2 or greenhouse gas equivalent is quite significant. So you can see from my little experiment there, like a bag of chips was 7 grams and releases about 400 or produces about 42 grams of carbon dioxide, and on it goes. So then I looked at my own plastic footprint, because that's what I was asking all the kids in schools to do. And so per week, we're a family of 3. I have a daughter and a husband, and the 3 of us were producing about 300-400 grams of plastic a week. And I thought we were doing pretty good. So I thought that was reasonably low. but still that creates like almost 2.5 kilograms of greenhouse gases. And if you multiply that up over 1 month and then 1 year, when you get to 10 years, you're looking at about 1.2 tons of greenhouse gases, which is frightening when you think about, we try really hard in our household to keep the amount of plastic down. But when I presented this to one class, we had some of the students coming back with close to a ton over just a 1 year period. And yeah, it's quite interesting to do as a little experiment for yourself to look at what you're actually producing. So other things that weigh a ton: the baby humpback whale, or a great white shark. And in Australia, unfortunately, we have the notoriety of having one of the highest per capita, per person, plastic use in a year. So the average per capita use is 50 kilograms. In Australia, that's 100 kilograms, which beats the US at 84, and the European per capita is only about 30 kilograms. 2 minutes, okay. So we need to reframe plastic pollution. It's not just an environmental issue, it's an intergenerational equity issue, because we're leaving it for our kids. It's a social issue. You can see it's a climate issue, and it's a justice issue, because the countries that are really dealing with the most of our plastic pollution problems don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. So inspire, that was our last section, and that's what we try and aim to do through Take 3, is to put a positive spin on all of our messaging and inspire people to make a difference. Bob Seger came out with this quote: if it can't be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production. So that's a pretty good philosophy to live by. We need to move towards a circular economy where there is no such thing as waste, but waste is in fact a resource. And we need to learn to change our behaviors. We have the control. We can say, not only do we reduce, reuse, and recycle, we can bookend that with refusing plastics and removing them when we see them. And as customers, we can really vote with our wallets for the future that we want. We can decide whether we want to purchase that product or whether we want to look for something comparable, but without the plastic wrapping. So it's really comes back to us, and not choosing for convenience, but choosing for the greater good. And can one individual make a difference? Can one person? Absolutely. Like, this is what Take 3 is all about. So collective actions, collective movements, collective work of lots of different people. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roberta. That was amazing. Took us on a real journey there. And thank goodness you ended up with some inspiring stuff at the end there. It got a bit bleak. At one point, but that was amazing. And
sorry about that.
No, it's good. We really need to come to terms with the reality of what's going on. So I really appreciate it. And it was very inspiring at the end there. So I very much appreciate it.